And we've gotten the notification that we are now live on Facebook. So that means people can start to join us. Jennifer Griswold here with 3 News Now, and we have a forum of community leaders. In the wake of George Floyd's death in Minneapolis, we have seen and heard from a lot of people across this country about things that need to change or discussions that should be had moving forward so that all people feel they can live their best life and live a good life in our country and in our communities. So here in Omaha, we wanted to gather some people to have a conversation about what can we all be doing in our own lives and what can we be doing as a community. And also, I know this is true for many of you on this panel, what are you already doing? There's so many things already being done in Omaha. We want to highlight that as well. So people will be able to join us, ask questions, and make comments. But I want to start, and sometimes take a little bit for people to join in. So I want to start by asking each one of you to introduce yourself, tell us who you're affiliated with, and give us your reflections on what you've seen the past few weeks and what you think the momentum is right now in this country. Terri, I'll start with you since you're upper left corner right now. Terri, can you introduce yourself and talk? Thanks.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. My name is Terri D. Sanders. I am the current publisher of the Omaha Star newspaper, which is the community newspaper in North Omaha that is 83 years of publishing in July. I'm very honored to be a part of the newspaper staff. You asked what is my opinion of what has gone on. I am just old enough to have remembered when Martin Luther King was assassinated, when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, and when Vivian Strong died here in Omaha. And I got to see the social unrest, I don't want to call it a riot, the social unrest that happened across the country in those national pieces and the social unrest that happened here in Omaha. And a couple of things. What I have witnessed in 2020, I think that COVID has significantly affected how people have reacted. People have been in the house for 2 or 3 months, and now here is an opportunity to be out on something that is legitimate. I hope that things don't spike with COVID, but I think that there is a definite reason that people are in unrest. I think that the protests here locally especially have been very orderly. We may have had some windows smashed, but we certainly didn't have any buildings burned. And we had one loss of life that was very, very tragic. But we're not here for one loss, we are here for the group. And so the Omaha Star is charged with news. And the focus of the Omaha Star is the good news about our community. So while we do report on what is going on nationally, and we have some editorials, we also report the good news of what's going on locally, because you can get the negative things everywhere, but you can't get good news everywhere. And so we pride ourselves on doing that, but we are also on the forefront of what is going on locally.
Great, thanks so much. Highlighting the good is definitely important.
Yes.
Chief, I'll ask you to go next. And I do want to take a moment. I know at a news conference recently, you mentioned that no one has asked how morale is or how officers are doing through all this. And it is important that we know there are a lot of hardworking people in your department. And so I will take a moment to ask you, start, how is morale in the department right now too?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. First of all, thanks for having me on. I think this is an absolute good forum, and the necessity to have these conversations is no more pressing than it ever has been, as it is right now. So the officers they're back to normal shifts now. We have some crews that have gone 16 straight days. So they're back to their regular days off. And what we're doing now is we're staffing any events that we have, just extra staffing. But for their duration, they were working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it took its toll on us, but their spirits are high now. And we view this as a wonderful opportunity to improve what we do in policing and build upon our successes in Omaha. And so I appreciate you asking that question, Jennifer. I really do. For your Facebook viewers and for everybody, my name is Todd Schmaderer. I've been the chief of police for about 8 years now in the city of Omaha, and this is definitely a time period that I will never forget. But it's also a wonderful opportunity to advance this country, advance policing. And I think we took a step forward in 2015 after the event in Ferguson, and I think this is an opportunity to even take it even further. For those departments that didn't take 2015 seriously, this is their opportunity to step up their game. So I'd like to just take you back to when I first saw the video of George Floyd's death. When I first saw it, I was pretty horrified at what I saw. But as chief of police, I took it one step further. It wasn't just the officer with his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck. That was obviously horrific. What concerned me as chief is, how did we have 3 other officers there that were indifferent to this? How did they not step in and intervene? And that was very concerning to me and great cause for concern. And myself and my senior command staff, we instantly denounced it. We wanted to be out. We generally don't comment on national events, but on this one, we felt we needed to. And we also felt it had an opportunity to negatively damage our police community relations, which we cherish here in Omaha. It's because of our police community relationships and our partnerships that we've been able to come off of epidemic shooting levels to less than 100 the last several years. And then the last 3 years of homicides been our all-time lows for the city of Omaha. And that's community partnership. And it was healthy that way. Fast forward a week, and you had civil unrest mixed in with many, many, many peaceful protests. And I think that's kind of key. In Omaha, I think we had 30 plus events, protest events. And I can look back and I can say maybe 2 or 3 caused us some issues. And the message from those very peaceful protests, we've already met as a command staff, and we're already looking at ways that we feel that we can improve. And we're going to strike on this opportunity, and give us a week or so, and we'll have those implemented and for everybody to see. And I'll be happy to talk about those as the questions come about. Jennifer, we'll try to be as open as we can, and we look forward to this. But for now, I'm going to let you get to some of your other guests.
Thanks, Chief. Keith, would you care to go next?
I'd be happy to. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you, Jennifer, for this opportunity. And I'm proud to be on this esteemed panel of community leaders. My name is Keith Station. My day job is I do workforce development at Heartland Workforce Solutions. I'm also a community member, a full-time dad of 3 daughters plus 1 bonus daughter. And I'm, again, born and raised in North Omaha, left for some time, and I've been back in our community for about 9 years. I am proud that I get to wear 2 hats in the community often, again, as a workforce development person, but also as a member of the community who produced me, to be at tables, to be in groups, to talk to people individually about what makes the city great and where this city has opportunity. I'm passionate about family, relationships, and solutions, and golf. I think that my contribution to what can be done is something that I will continue to do is to be unapologetic about having honest conversations about solutions in a productive way. We have to be honest, and we have to look at the root cause of issues. We have to know our history in order to move forward and in order to make advancement. When I reflect on the last few weeks, it has been eye-opening. It has been it's made me angry at times. It's made me feel numb. It's been humbling. And it's made me feel really blessed that I again have this opportunity to be a part of conversations that look like moving toward solutions. I'm very proud of our community because in the last few years that I've been back in Omaha, I've had a chance to learn why it makes so much sense to be a proponent of improved, intentional police community relations. And I'm proud to see how Chief Schmaderer and before him, Chief Warren had laid the foundation for making sure that this happens in a really tangible way and in a transparent way. So I'm proud of that. I come from a community where police community relations was not something that was what you do. It was kind of a foreign concept, and it wasn't cool, and it was something that took a while to understand the value of. So I'm proud of our community's advancement in that regard. I know this isn't about public safety necessarily, but I feel, Jennifer, if you don't mind, and Chief, if you don't mind, I want to just tell you that there are some law enforcement officers that I care a lot about who do great work, and as I reflect on the last few weeks, I feel like it's not fair to them. Included is Lieutenant Thomas, who may be sitting there next to the Chief, but Kenneth Fox is a friend and fraternity brother. Philip Hodges is a family member, friend, and fraternity brother. Marcus Taylor is a friend and fraternity brother, and John Ewing, formerly of Omaha Police, is a friend and a fellow community leader. And I'm honored at the service that they lend to this conversation and to this community. It's not fair for individuals who erode that. It's not fair, and I think that where our community goes from here is undoing. It should be to undo that, and to do it in an honest way. I feel like we need to, again, have hard conversations. I think we need to understand what inclusion means. The reason why I say that is because I learned that inclusion means everybody, even majorities who have opportunities to learn about what we can do better and do differently. And I think that'll help to heal our community and help us to not let people die in vain. I don't think that any of the recent deaths that we've learned about, George Floyd, and locally with young James Scurlock, I don't think that those individuals died in vain. I think that, and even people who have experienced loss before that, I think that we've built up to this point, and our community is ready to address difficult issues, again, to be solution oriented, to do it together, and to hopefully be honest in so doing. Again, thank you for an opportunity to be a part of the conversation. And again, I'm looking through the lens of workforce development and being a community member. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Keith. Josh, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and your thoughts on what you've been seeing?
Yeah, my name's Josh Dotzler. Love what Keith said. Number one, just grateful to be a part of this conversation and really respect all of the leaders who are doing incredible work in our community. I'm a part of a nonprofit called Abide, located right here in North Omaha. And our heart is really community revitalization. And we do it through kind of 3 specific areas: trying to build safer neighborhoods, stronger families, and then raising up emerging leaders who want to be a part of the solution all across our community. And so we've had the opportunity to partner with the police. We partner with nonprofits, organizations, churches outside the community, in the community. And really, our organization's been around for 30 years. And, you know, one of the things, as somebody who has a white dad and a black mom, dad's from small town Iowa, mom's from Washington, D.C., and just some of the experiences I've had in growing up in North Omaha, but having an opportunity to go to Creighton University, I've been able to work with people all across the city. And one of the things that I've been saying is that these videos have given visuals to voices that have been crying out for generations. And we've seen some of the challenges, and you know, as a community leader, you try to express some of those challenges and you try to engage people. But when you see visuals and videos like we've seen recently, there's an understanding and an awareness that you can no longer ignore. And so I think we've seen in our city, so many people want to be a part of the solution. So many people, I believe, care, but they just haven't been aware. And so conversations like this, conversations we've been able to be a part of over the course of the last several weeks, even several months, have really helped, I think, spur on our city's opportunity to be a part of the solution. And I'm grateful for so many people who care and want to be a part. And I just believe that the more awareness, the more urgency we have and live with, the more we're going to be able to see equality and justice happen all across our city.
Thank you so much. For people who are just joining us on this Facebook Live feed, you can ask questions, you can make comments, and we will see those, and we can actually ask our panel the questions that you have. I know one question I see come up, I belong to a lot of mom Facebook groups, for example. It's a lot of where do we go now in terms of how do we teach our children? What are conversations we should be having? And I guess that really runs the gamut in terms of what are conversations we should be having regarding race relations, what are conversations we should be having regarding policing. I don't know who wants to address this one first, but I think that's something a lot of parents out there, as we said, we want to be better. It's just how are we better? How can we be better?
I'll jump in on that. I don't have little children, but I have grandchildren, and I have friends who have children. And I think it sounds cliche, but honesty is the best policy. And we explain to the children because obviously with television and live reports, everybody sees everything and children see it all. And so that you break it down, they always say that if a third grader can understand your explanation, you've done well. So take it to their level, make it real. It all started with Mr. Floyd, knee on the neck. Why was that wrong? And while we don't know what was in that police officer's mind or heart, the outcome was death. And children now experience death at a much younger age and are exposed to death at a much younger age. And we need to be honest. We need to be forthright. But don't make it so scary that they can't sleep at night and they think that their parent is next. And if their mom or dad goes out, they will succumb to a police officer with a knee on the neck. So honesty is the best policy, but keep it simple. I think sometimes as adults, we go overboard in explaining what's going on, and then we've created more problems than we intended to.
Sure.
And I would add on that. I think the beauty of this current tragic scenario is that it highlights not just this situation, but really a history and generations of challenges. And so we have 4 kids, 10, 8, 6, and 2. And so we've used this as an opportunity to start talking about history in Black history and how, early on, when you look at the way Blacks were treated and you look at the progression in our society and how things have gotten better, but our history says a lot about who we are today. And I love my parents' story because my parents were married, but my mom, as a Black woman, would tell my dad that he was racist. And my dad never said this, but I guarantee he was thinking this: how can I be racist? I'm married to you. And what we began to realize was my dad had a worldview that he saw life through. And that worldview, based on his experiences, caused him to live with preferences. And so, he would eat at certain places, he would interact with certain people. And ultimately, our preferences cause us to live with unintentional prejudices. And so sometimes, people will say, man, I'm colorblind, or I just love all people. And the idea of that is great. But the reality is there are certain challenges that certain people face because of the history of our society. And it's important for our children to understand that. It's important for them to understand the history, the progress we've made, but also highlighting the challenges we still face. And I think our current situations have helped highlight that, to say we've got a lot more work that still needs to be done.
Sure. Question just came up. Does Abide provide people of South Omaha that want to be part of the solution, especially as minority? I feel we need to educate more. Also, can we be part of the talk? So South Omaha, it sounds like, talking about the Hispanic community. Is this another group of people that you're reaching out to, or is there another organization that you know about?
Yeah, we don't spend a ton of time working in South Omaha right now. My wife grew up in South Omaha. She's half Mexican, half Thai. And I'm half black, half white. Our kids are the most beautiful mutts you've ever seen. But we have planted churches in South Omaha. We partner, but most of our focus and our work is right here in North Omaha.
Sure. And to address that, just as part of this forum and these talks, we're looking to have talks like this more and more. So if we definitely can expand and invite more people in the future too. Chief, at the beginning, you had mentioned that you were talking about implementing changes. Do you care to address any more specific thoughts you're having? I know the mayor yesterday announced that the department will be looking at all use of force options that you have and whether or not they are appropriate. Is that one of the things?
Well, yes. I mean, one of the things we heard out of the peaceful protests was a number of use of force parameters that we're asking us to change some of those. That's what the protests, some of them were asking that. So we have convened and we're actually vetting and scouring all those right now. But some things that we've already realized that can be greater points of emphasis. There can be additional language in our policy. There are times that we train on something, but it's not in policy. We want to make sure all that's shored up. So if it's in our policy, we train on it. And the only thing I will say right now, Jennifer, is there are four points right now that we are going to implement. We're studying a couple of the other ones to see how we can implement them within our police department. It's something that's been on our radar for a while, so we should be pretty close to being done with our research on that. But those will be tangible changes that I think are important to our community, and when we make those, we'll get those out. But can I dive in just a minute to some of the changes that we made years ago where Omaha is a little bit separated from most police departments across the country in the sense that we have full body camera deployment. We also have full taser deployment, which gives the officers a less lethal option. And we're, born maybe out of some bad times, but we have a very aggressive training program in the Omaha Police Department that teaches implicit bias, cultural sensitivity, and our mental health approach to how we deal with those in a mental crisis is went from just average to probably an industry leader. And the combination of those has allowed the police department to have a culture that we feel is strong and something to build upon, and a culture that'll be acceptable to our additional changes to use of force. In 2019, we only had one officer involved shooting, and we haven't had any in 2020. And for a city our size, that's pretty astronomical number. That's low. So these are all areas that we can build upon, and you can only build upon a good culture. It's hard to put additional remedies on a culture that's bad. So we have a culture in the police department that I think is open for some of our future changes. And I'll conclude this answer with, I want to go back to the first question where it was, how do we heal? We have a wonderful opportunity to heal here, because in the first time that I can ever recall, as we look at police and citizen encounters, there's always been some type of a debate in the past as whether that was right, wrong, whose side was right, how do we splice that? This is the first time I can remember where unanimously all police departments across the country and the citizens agree that what happened to George Floyd was wrong. And I love that common ground as a base and a springboard to start the healing process.
It's good.
Yeah, I think that is important, that it is, in the past, it used to be, well, was that okay because of this or this? And now it's universal. You're right. Everyone is saying that was not okay. We got a comment here. All of you are great. Thank you so much for your time. I agree, for sure. Keith, I was curious, in your role, how has COVID affected you in terms of reaching out to young people and reaching out to people, making sure that they have employment opportunities and things like that? Has that been difficult given this climate right now?
It absolutely has. It's been very difficult because a major part of our value to the community and to workforce development is the fact that we are conveners. That means we pull together employers and individuals who are looking for career opportunities, and we create a marketplace for people for businesses to find talent for individuals to connect to high demand, high skill, high wage career pathways. And so now that we have had to limit and social and physically distance ourselves from those convening points, it's been challenging. And so what that has caused us to do is to be more creative about virtual training opportunities and meetings, and to make sure that the work continues. As I'm sure everyone knows, and all the viewers watching know, is that the unemployment claims data has been staggering. It's through the roof. It's unprecedented in terms of the number of individuals who are claiming their initial unemployment insurance claims. And it's been very telling. It's been highest in Douglas County, as you might imagine, and it has disproportionately affected youth and people of color and people that live in the zip codes that are primarily in Northeast and Southeast Omaha. And so we know that's disparate. We know that the solution looks like continuing on, finding new ways to allow folks to have access to online resources. We know that it means being uncomfortable. We know that it means being safe. You can't argue with data, and a lot of times the data shows us that there are disparities that exist in education and healthcare and in access to resources and information. And we know that people who need our help the most need to be informed about how to stay safe and how to protect themselves and their families and their kids. And so we have a responsibility to ensure that people are safe but also have access to making sure they can gain sustainable wage employment. So that's been tricky. We're just now seeing people being more willing to come back out and attempt to find jobs, even though there's been a really high demand and people who are coming to our center. So it's definitely been tricky. Parents are keeping their kids from going out, but now we're in that tricky point where do we remain in quarantine, or do we slowly begin to come out? Well, again, the data says that it's not quite time to do that yet, but try telling that to someone who doesn't have the resources to feed their family, or who's really struggling, or doesn't know if they'll be able to pay their rent or their critical bills in the next month. Try telling a person like that they should not go out and look for employment or look for solutions or resources. And that's really been difficult. And so we are mindful of that. That fuels us to do the work and to be creative with our solutions and to partner with other agencies. But we have to do so in a safe way. We have to do so mindful of the unique challenges that youth have. We have to do so thinking about what school will look like coming in, through the summer and into the fall. All those things are things we grapple with every day to find solutions to find a safe way to get youth and young adults back to school and into employment.
Sure. Nadia wrote, how can we trust that our reports will be taken seriously? I'm assuming she's talking about police reports or complaints there. Again, I'm making an assumption there, but Chief, could you address that? What is in place if people are making reports or about the police department, or maybe about other things, and they want to make sure it's taken seriously?
Yeah, absolutely, Jennifer. Let me start out by saying, if you have a complaint against the Omaha Police Department, there are many ways that complaint can be heard. There's an official complaint process in which you can come down and fill out a complaint form. The second area I always say is, if you're not comfortable coming here, get with a community leader, get with somebody that can get a hold of me. Most of them have my number. And oftentimes I'll just authorize an internal investigation based on what I'm told. So once we get that complaint, it's fully investigated by a team of supervisors, of sergeants who work in internal affairs unit. They're overseen by a lieutenant and a deputy chief. And we will go through every second of that complaint, including interviewing all witnesses, including interviewing all officers, reviewing all body camera. And in addition to all camera footage that's out there, most of the time nowadays, when something occurs outdoors, there's generally some type of camera footage from it, either some type of street camera, business camera, or something. So those are all very important options. And of course, the body cameras is oftentimes is like watching a movie. Sometimes we can actually see what's going on. So once we do that, we apply what took place to what the uh, allegation is, and we see if that conforms to our policy or not. If it does not, it becomes a sustained violation. If it does conform to the policy, we write a letter and explain why it does. And once you get that letter back from the Omaha Police Department, you have an option of having that process reviewed, which the process is it goes to the sergeants, then it goes to the lieutenant, then it goes to the deputy chief, and then it goes to myself. And then on large matters that are of extremely egregious in nature or by allegation, I will review that with the entire deputy chief command staff so that we have a complete accounting as to what's going on. So once that is done and you get your letter and the findings as to what took place, you always have the option of appealing that to a citizens review board, or you have the option of requesting a meeting with me as well. And those are your review options. Now, it is a citizens review board. I think there's 5 members on it. They represent each quadrant of our city, or each 5 parts of our city. And that is kind of how we do things here in the Omaha Police Department. And I wish I could peel the books back and show you how thorough those are, because if you look at the size of the old phone books that we used to have, each case investigation will at least be that thick. Jennifer, does your question, the person who asked the question, want me to expand on that any further?
She is saying she feels it needs to be made public. So the system doesn't work if someone is crooked. It needs to be made public. So I don't know what parts of that are public and what parts aren't. There are a lot of parts of policing that are actually public information.
There's a lot of personnel laws, and then also the union contracts all across the country make personnel matters something that I'm really not able to discuss. So that aspect isn't. If it becomes a crime or it's appealed, then there's an opportunity for me to talk about it and explain it further. But I am bound by federal personnel laws, and also collective bargaining agreements that are pretty uniform throughout the country. And as chief, and I think a lot of chiefs will tell you this, sometimes retention of officers is our hardest challenge. When you enter into law enforcement, you adopt those protections, and so it makes it hard for us to get rid of those that we feel should be. And in the private sector, oftentimes a corporation or a business will try to get rid of 10 to 15% of their workforce a year to see if they can bring in somebody that produces a little more. We don't really have that luxury in public government work. And I surmise, Jennifer, that's something that's going to be looked at and talked about quite a bit in the weeks and days to come.
Sure. And one thing I know, during everyone's introduction, we had people talking about how they have some great relationships with people in the Omaha Police Department. So I know the chief had brought this up right away, but if perhaps you don't feel comfortable going to a police officer with a report, assuming it's not an immediate emergency, if you go to a community leader, maybe they have someone they work with specifically who can help be a bit of a liaison, if that would make a person feel more comfortable, because there are many people in our community who are working with officers. Terri, you were talking about your perspective of, seeing really for decades of changes. What have you seen recently in the Omaha community in terms of, development and change that you find inspiring and positive?
I think that in the Omaha community at large, there's development going on all over our city. And one of the things, as I was listening to everyone and thinking, we see more young people involved. We have what we call in our community the elders, and they are doing the work. But the elders are also bringing on young people to work, I hope, beside them, so that we can keep moving forward. I comically call myself the oldest millennial because I try to keep up. And our society has become instant. We have microwaves and we have ninja foodies and things that cook things in half the time. But in my experience, I have been looking back at other protests and how long those protests take to effect change. And while it has been approximately 16 days that people have been on marches and assembling and gathering to protest, there are some protests that have gone on for 365 days. That's more than a year. And some people don't know this, that before there was a bus boycott in Montgomery, there was a bus boycott in Omaha, Nebraska. It was the Omaha Council Bluffs bus line. And that went on for over a year. And while people were not marching in the streets and everybody didn't walk to work, and it was back in the 50s when, everybody didn't have a car, the way that they protested was that I believe the bus fare was a quarter or 25 cents. People paid in pennies. Can you imagine being the bus driver at the end of your route? You had to count your fare, and the bus drivers had to count their own fare. And this was because African Americans, or back then Negroes, were not hired to drive buses. And that was the protest. But it took a long time. And I think that things don't have to take a long time to be effective, but it does take time. It's just like, and maybe this doesn't happen anymore, but when you skin your knee, there's a process. Your knee the skin color goes off of it, and then it starts to heal. You get some speckles of skin color, and then it continues to heal, and then you get a scab. The scab is hard, it protects that injury, and then the scab falls off, and then your healing process is near about done. So we are probably just at the point where there's some speckles of color, but the scab is not anywhere near forming. And so it's going to be a minute. But the thing to do is to persevere and stick to it. And I think that's the one thing that I enjoy about being connected with the Omaha Star. And I knew Mildred Brown when she lived. And one thing was, she stuck with it. Her legacy is she stuck with it. When there was community upheaval, the Black Panthers protected her building. And she stuck with it. She lived in what is now the Omaha Star office. Wow. And so I think that the important thing is don't give up. It may take a minute, but that's how we heal. Just like that scab on your knee is coming.
Words there. Josh, you work with a lot of young people, not to generalize for all young people, but what are they saying? What are you hearing from them? Is it sadness? Is it anger? Is it hope? Is it all of it? What would you say is the dominant feeling or concern they have?
Yeah, I think for a lot of young people, anger has probably been one of the first responses, and just a level of frustration. I do think we live in a generation where, the younger generation, and I've heard some of the elder leaders from the community talk about how just proud they are that there's a generation of young people who are really stepping up and taking a stand and peacefully protesting. And so I think there is a generation of young people who want to be a part of the solution, maybe don't even know all of what's transpired historically. And that's where I just love what was shared earlier, because there is a history and there's progress that's been made, but they have a passion. I say we have a passion to just be a part of the solution. I think one of the challenges with young people is sometimes, there's not as much perspective and not as much history. So strategically, we don't have as much to run on, but there's a level of passion and enthusiasm And I think that passion and enthusiasm with a level of humility can build upon what many leaders in our community have done for a while. And I think I'm seeing just an incredible level of collaboration between the young generation and the old generation. And I'm seeing the older generation, I'm seeing the leadership have a level of humility to invite some of us young individuals into the conversation and invite us to be at the table and to be a part of making decisions, and vice versa. As young leaders, we have to continue to honor what's been done before us. We have to celebrate it. And then we have to recognize our job isn't to do something different, but it's to build upon the foundation that so many people have been laying. So I think that passion is one of our greatest strengths and can really help continue to cultivate and create energy. But we have to move from kind of that frustration, passion, to now getting very strategic with how we live our lives, the decisions we make, and the strategies that we really engage in moving forward so that we can continue to bridge the gap.
We've seen a lot of changes being made, major businesses making changes pretty quickly. As Terri was saying, we have to have patience, but there have been some things already happening. Keith, as a Black man seeing some of these changes being made, I'm thinking, NFL and their opinions of whether it was too late, but, is saying that they now apologize for getting upset with the kneeling, the NASCAR getting rid of the Confederate flag or not allowing it. How does it feel to see these types of things now being approached by our culture and being tackled by our culture?
Well, Jennifer, I have you'll need a whole other hour for me. I have a lot of thoughts on it, but I'll sum it up and say this. I think that sports is what you see in sports is a microcosm of society often, and so I'm torn a bit because I'm passionate about sports as well. I'm a sports fan and have worked in sports, and so those examples you just gave are really timely ones. I'm torn because I think that it's powerful to see the change that this unrest that we're feeling now has begun to cause. I'm unimpressed though by certain things because it's too late for some. If there are movements that are waking up, I think that's a good thing. If there are powers that be that now realize that it's time for a change and there's opportunity for change, that's good. But I also feel like this is overdue. That doesn't mean that it's not productive, but I feel like this is way overdue, and that kind of keeps a spark going in me. NASCAR has decided to stop flying the Confederate flag. The commissioner of the NFL says that we were wrong. There are players that in various sports that intend to take a knee when the leagues resume, and that'll be really interesting. The thing that it will do, however, is draw attention to the conversation, which I think is probably the most valuable thing, and it's powerful. But I'm glad to see that there are people who are courageous enough to say that we can do better, we can do more, or I was wrong, or I was looking through my privileged lens, and there's a blind spot that I have. So thank you for helping me see that. I think we've seen some of that. The conversation about kneeling, for example, is not about our troops. It's not about the military. It's not about the flag. And I heard somebody put it a certain way that says, don't use the flag as a blindfold. You can respect the flag and you can honor the flag of the United States, but don't put it over your eyes so that you can't see. And that's very important. I think that perhaps some folks are taking the flag off of their eyes so that they can be better contributors to society. Privilege, blind spots, and bias are, I think, the things that are getting addressed through some of the things that sports leagues and athletes are being willing to take a stand and voice. So I'm glad to see it. I heard of an advertiser that pulled their advertising dollars from a show that was made some comments or some remarks. The host of the show made some comments or remarks that were maybe inflammatory, I guess. And so that advertiser pulled their advertising dollars from the show. But this host has been using that kind of incendiary language and inflammatory language. It's not new. And so that I'm trying to grapple with that part. We need to continue to do better. It's a process. We need to continue to do better. Again, we need to be honest. We need to point out injustice. We need to draw attention to injustice. We need to be willing to be uncomfortable. And then I think you begin to see more shift in a community, in a society, in a country that begins to heal.
Yeah, if I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like a lot of these things we're seeing, there's maybe a concern of fear that maybe they're being done right now because it's so in the spotlight, so it's in the moment to do it, but you want to make sure and hope that it is actually for the long term that people are addressing these issues and not just doing it because the spotlight's on at this moment.
I sure hope so. I sure hope so.
Yeah. Terri, you were nodding quite a bit. Same thoughts on that?
Yes, I think that while it's great that Amazon has put Black Lives Matters on their delivery trucks, there is more money spent per capita by African Americans on items in this country. I think that it's great that people are waking up, but do not go to sleep at the wheel and do not take a nap. Because while everything is hot right now, and while it is in our faces, 6 months from now, if there have been no changes, it still needs to be in our faces. And we still need to stand up, kneel down, speak out, get a t-shirt, whatever you need to do to express yourself. But don't just let it die. Don't let it ride down. Don't let it be downplayed. And I think that many times that's what happens. Over time, it just kind of wanes. And, we have to keep in mind that we're still doing all this in the middle of a pandemic. And so while we are out there protesting, we need to still remain safe. Some people still are not going out. Some people's immune systems are not what they could be, and they cannot participate. And those are most of the older adults. So when you see younger people out there, encourage them, get them some water, send some snacks, something. You may not be able to be on the front line, but you can be part of the support system, which is still important. But I think that, this is not a short game. This is not, this is more, and I'm not a track person, but whatever that long race is, this is that. This is cross country. This is not a relay. Yes, we are handing off the baton. The elders are handing it to the young people, but you got to keep running. You cannot stop. It is not a short race. It is a long race.
I think it's a marathon for sure. Thanks, Terri. Chief, one thing I was wondering during some of the protests, we saw a lot of officers actually really making sure they were having conversations and taking a knee. And we saw, Lieutenant Thomas speak at one of the very, very large rallies, and it was powerful to hear her words as part of it. Was there guidance given to officers on if they could do that, or is that just you allowed people to do what they wanted to do and felt compelled to do? Or what conversations were had in that way?
Sure, I think that's a great question. We wanted to be interactive with all the peaceful protests because that provided us a forum to talk to people. When there was unrest associated with it, there was no opportunities for dialogue. We had to assume a different role. So I separate those two out. And so we did from the top down, wanted to be inclusive, wanted to hear what was being said. And we knew we had some signature voices in our community. And those events went over amazingly well in this city, and the Omaha Police Department got to be a part of those. And so I'm very appreciative of our community on that and for allowing us to interact in those. And that's why that message was heard and resonated a lot more, because it's kind of hard to hear, Jennifer, when rocks and eggs and things are being thrown at you. So those events really resonate with me. And yes, we wanted to be inclusive with our community on that front, where those peaceful protests allied, so that we could hear their voices. That's part of our mission in this whole thing, and that's what we're talking about, is we do want to hear what is being said and try to act on that and improve policing. And if we could do it in Omaha is situated really good on this front. If we could take it a second step here, perhaps we can be a model for this. Perhaps Omaha, which is a city about the size of Minneapolis, can show everybody that it can be done.
For people who don't know, what types of things, when it comes to community relations, does the Omaha Police Department take part in? You know, I'm thinking off the top of my head, specifically PACE seems to be a very good program.
Sure. I mean, PACE is talked about a lot because it's been around for years, and we've got probably about 3,000 kids associated with PACE, and they're being taught by the police officers how to play sports, et cetera. So the beauty of that is they get to see that officer outside of a uniform, because we're people too. And what I like about it is they see that officer as a coach who, just happens to be an Omaha police officer. So that's a great avenue. But we participate weekly in the 360 meetings, and we've gained a lot of partnerships that we participate on a daily basis in this community. And it's probably something, Jennifer, I could talk days on. And the reality of it is, it's a good business model for us, because who knows the community better than those who live there? And if we want to help you reduce crime, we need to be a partner with you. We need to have good police community relationships, because the community, not only do they want us to be very professional in our policing, but they want us to reduce crime. And I look at the last 3 years in the Omaha Police Department, where we've had in the low 20s of homicides, when we used to average 45 a year. That's, you times that by 3 years, that's 75 lives that did not die in the city of Omaha, because our police community relations and our policing plan has evolved enough to produce that. So there's a lot of things that go into police community relationships, but ultimately it's to improve the quality of life for everybody who lives here.
Thanks so much.
Jennifer?
Oh, go ahead. Yes, Terri?
I just want to say that I think the Omaha Police Department does a more than outstanding job. They are present at community events. That is Black and white officers and officers of color are always present. They get to know the children, or they interact with the children, so the children are not afraid. And I think that's important. And we don't see that in other police departments. I mean, I've visited other cities, and you see a police officer and you ducking and hiding. Here in Omaha, it's like, hey, Officer hoo-hoo. And so I think that Chief Schmaderer, I just want to say publicly that I think that you and your department are beacons for other police departments around the country to maybe check in and see what you're doing and how you relate with not only the North Omaha community, but the community at large. And I think that, somebody needs to say that. Right now, policemen are not people's favorite people, but there are some outstanding golden eggs in the bunch, and you are part of it.
Right.
Thank you, Terri. It means a lot to me.
And we have Fiola in the comments giving different examples, and there are quite a few: coffee with a cop, shop with a cop, cops and bobbers, fun in the park, Christmas in the village, and quite a few more other events where people are trying to make sure that they're engaging. And when we're engaging, when people are engaging with each other, it's not just, when a crime is being committed. It's in other things too. Kathy wrote, in Omaha. Yes, we're talking about here in Omaha. What final thoughts does everyone have? What did I miss? What would you like to tell people who are listening in? I know I'm putting you on the spot there, but Keith, would you like to start?
Sure. What we'll begin to see is people really focused on, okay, what do we do now, and let's start talking about real solutions. And I would recommend everybody take a quick read of an editorial, I think it is, that President Obama released recently. And even the title is poignant because it's where our mind should go. It's called "How to Make This a Turning Point for Real Change." How to make this a turning point for real change. And in it, it's really brief. It gives some good thoughts and talks about or deals with, is protesting more important, or is politics and policy more important? And he says both are. Protests, bring light to things and injustices, and makes people aware of the changes that need to be made. And then also casting ballots is important, obviously, for obvious reasons. He says be specific and prescriptive in the solutions and the things you want to see. And then ultimately, as Ms. Sanders said, it's going to be a long journey. So everybody get ready for that. Along the way, we will see incremental change. Like some of the data that the OPD very transparently shows that shows a decline in some of those critical statistics that show that our community is advancing. And then also, let's make anger move toward peace. And it takes a lot of people, it takes an open mind, takes an open heart, takes some hard work, honest conversations, remembering what has happened historically, and a mindset. And I think if we do some reading on some things that enlighten us about how to make this a turning point for real change, I think we'll be equipped to do that.
Josh, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'll just say, Terri, you're my new hero. Just appreciate all that you've shared. Love your perspective. Chief Schmaderer, really, really appreciate the work that you've done. Your team has done. Every time we've held an event, your team has been present. They participate, got great relationships with Officer Kanger and others. And so just really grateful for all that you do for our city, for the community. Keith, appreciate all the work that you do, from beating me up on the basketball court in the neighborhood to the community work you do now. I just think I agree with Keith. I think we're at a turning point, and I think we've seen challenges like never before in our city, but I think there's also opportunity like never before, and there's awareness like never before. And I think we've been challenging people to really do three things, and it's not a short-term deal, but it's a long-term commitment to, number one, learning. And for many of us in our city, this is the first time we've become aware that there are people in our city who don't have the same opportunities that we have or our children have. And there's a process to learning and growing. And I think we have to, as a city, as individuals, make a long-term commitment to continuing to learn and understand the realities of all the different cultures and individuals that live in our city. Number two is we're encouraging people, you got to stand. And this situation highlighted it, but when injustice happens, you have to stand up for what's right. You've got to say something. We've got to call it out. We've got to speak up on behalf of the injustices that are happening. We've got to stand for justice, and not just when crisis happens. We can't just be reactive, but proactively. We've got to talk about, we've got to, like Terry's doing, we got to keep telling good news stories about incredible justice that's happening in our city. And then we've got to stand with. I think one of the best things we can do is find individuals and organizations who are on the front line and really join them in their efforts, support them in recognizing that there's a gap in our city. So we're asking people to commit to learning, asking people to commit to standing. And then the last one is we're asking people to commit to giving. And I think when you look at some of the racial inequalities, there's a huge economic gap. And it's going to take a level of sacrifice. It's going to take a level of investment. But I believe that our city has the potential and the prosperity to see everybody in our city have the same opportunity. And so those are really the three things that we're calling people to do.
All right, Terri, any closing thoughts for you?
I agree with Josh, and I agree with Keith. I agree with everybody on here. One thing about it, it is a mindset, and education is important. While we have classrooms and young people Google everything, you need to look back historically, what has been done, what is what has achieved. This is, I believe, 100 years from Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And when you talk about community development, if you look back and see how that community was developed, now, true enough, it was wiped out in about 2 days by racial unrest, and I mean real racial unrest. And so you need to educate yourself. You need to, as Josh said, take a stand. And when you stand, stand up straight and plant your feet and do not be moved.
You have the best words.
Come on.
Chief, I've noticed a couple comments coming in, and so maybe for your closing, it might be even addressing, I mean, you can say what you want, obviously, but addressing what you said at the beginning of things you're doing, because some people are still saying, we noticed problems at protests where there was use of force that shouldn't have been used, things like that. So if people are just joining us, maybe or joined late, maybe you could explain some of the things you'll be doing moving forward to make sure people feel comfortable.
Sure. As it relates to the protest, we're going to do a complete review and after action as to what took place, because we do have live links and recordings of all that we do in in-depth logs of what takes place at every protest. So we want to make sure we have a complete review of that. There's a few areas that we've noticed already that we think we could do better in the future. And then also there's going to be some individual complaints that come out of those protests, and we will try to dive into each one of those as well. Some of them that we've had up to this point, we're looking into, but we had so many agencies working with us. We had at least a dozen agencies down there with us. So a lot of it is just going back, piecing each incident down and finding out what agency the officer was from, what occurred, who was the officer, and getting through some of the body gear that we wear in some of these events. So a lot of it's just pinning it down as to who we need to interview and see what's going on with all these instances. So we're definitely gonna do that. That's part of being professional is when we go to these events, our goal is to professionally police them and to have a peaceful environment so everybody can express their First Amendment freedom of speech. But also as part of that professionalism, we do have to take a look at how we managed that scenario and go from there and make tweaks and changes. But I know we all were allowed to close on one closing thought, so I'll do this. After a week of probably my most tired time, I've never been so tired in my life. We're off of that now, and now there's excitement for me because in the past, law enforcement has made baby steps in the aftermath of things that have occurred. I think this is a wonderful opportunity, and I personally think law enforcement is going to make some giant leaps forward in the aftermath of what has occurred here. And that's just my gut feeling as being chief of police. But I'm one of the longest serving major city police chiefs that there is in this country. So I think I have a good feel for this, and I think law enforcement across this country is going to make big strides. So thank you for having me on. It's great to be a part of this panel.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for taking part. I really appreciate everyone's willingness that you wanted to be part of this. I think that speaks volumes for our community as a whole. And I thank everyone who asked questions and wrote in, and people were saying they really enjoyed this. So please contact our station. You can contact us right on our Facebook page. If you have other topics and other forums, we can get more together and have more discussions like this, perhaps more specific ones as well. So thank you again. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.